welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos. I'm going to be talking a little bit about, briefly, I just want to touch on post-traumatic stress disorder and a little bit of, it's basically just really focusing on the post-traumatic stress and not so much the bipolar or depression aspect of it, although it does kind of all tie in together. This is just something that I just learned myself, and I didn't even know that this was an actual thing. And of course, being in out of therapy for 20 plus years, you know, I thought I've learned everything there is as far as coping skills and coping mechanisms. But this is one that really stood out, and makes a whole lot of sense as to some of my reactions or responses, or their lack thereof response. And I'm pretty sure you're all, anybody who's in the mental health community, or if you're receiving treatment or you've received treatment in the past, clearly I'm not a doctor, so you know, I'm not coming at you from a doctor's point of view. I'm just basically sharing what I've learned from doctors and books and literature. But there is a book that it's a really good book, and I've just kind of started going through it, and it's the PTSD workbook, and this is the 3rd edition. I'm assuming there's other editions, but it's a new Harbinger self-help workbook, simple effective techniques for overcoming traumatic stress symptoms, and it's by Mary Beth Williams. And I just kind of started going through it. I haven't really gotten all the way, but it just has a whole lot of, you know, it talks about if you're having nightmares, and you know, where are those coming from, and you know, keeping yourself safe. It has like questions where you can like write down a list of things, you know, if you have lost interest in doing things, or you have like feelings of detachment and stuff like that. And it just gives you different exercises. Talks about, you know, dealing with sensations like body sensations, or just, you know, sadness, anger, emotional type feelings and sensations. You know, pain, you might feel pain, you might feel itching, you might feel numb. So this is a really good book, and just kind of tells you, goes through all the different types of reactions and triggers and stuff with post-traumatic stress. And as you probably know, if you're dealing with post-traumatic stress or any type of emotional disorder, mental health, whatever you want to call it, however you want to title it, but I was never aware. I always knew the fight, flight, or freeze. You know, the whole response when you're triggered, when something that happens that triggers a response from you, or it triggers something from the past, and it might not even be something big, but it's something that is enough to cause you to react, or you know, your heart starts racing, and you kind of feel, it kind of takes you back to a place where your life may have really been in danger. But this particular situation, you know, something was said, or, you know, a feeling, it triggered a feeling inside of you that maybe it doesn't actually match exactly what's taking place, what's being said, or what the circumstances are. But that feeling and that trigger woke up something inside of you that happened, I don't know, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, a month ago, when you were, you know, 4 years old. I mean, there's triggers we don't really know. I don't know, and I'm sure they're still figuring it out and studying it. But will post-traumatic stress ever just go away? I don't think it'll ever really go away. I don't think we can ever like get rid of it. How we learn to deal with it is different, you know, because I know where I'm at now, and where I was even 5 years ago is a completely different place. And I mean, I've grown so much since, but I've also grown from 15 years ago and 20 years ago and 25 years ago and 30 years ago, even 40 years ago. But where I was when I was in my 20s is a completely different place. And at that time, they were still playing with medications and diagnosis and, you know, trying to figure out where, you know, where did I lie in that, you know, diagnosis as manic depressive, bipolar 1, bipolar 2. Definitely post-traumatic stress was always a factor. Um, and anxiety, of course. And the anxiety kind of goes along, I think, with all those things. I think you can have just anxiety, but usually with anxiety, there's something else attached to it because it roots and stems from something, a circumstance or something, a situation that occurred or something traumatic. But like I said, you know, I'm familiar with the fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm sure you are all also, if you know, like I said, if you're in treatment, or you were in treatment, or you know somebody's in treatment, or maybe you're a doctor or a social worker, obviously you know all this stuff. But there was one that I never even heard of, and I just became aware of it, and it makes sense because it really describes me, and it describes my responses and my reactions, or like I said, lack of. I just want to read a little bit of this, just because it's just going to be easier for you to understand, and it was just really easier for me to understand. But it's codependency, trauma, and the fawn, FAWN response. This is by Pete Walker. So basically what he's saying is he's worked with victims with childhood trauma, and those who on a regular basis were verbally, as we know, my camera has a mind of its own, and I think there's a little ghost that runs around here and just shuts the camera off and turns lights on and flushes toilets. But basically what I was saying was, you know, if you've been verbally, emotionally, physically abused, let's say, you know, at the dinner table, to help me understand, or to help others understand, the ramifications of childhood derived complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's extreme anxiety, responses to circumstances that are often emotional flashbacks to early traumatic events. And sometimes a current event can have like a vague resemblance of a past traumatic event, and it just like stirs up, like I said, and brings up those feelings of something that happened in the past. And it just can be vague, and it just might resemble something, but it's connected to a situation that happened to you in the past, and it can be triggered very easily, just in your mind. Like, our psyche is a funny thing. But basically, there's what happens in our mind, in our brain, is it's a situation that can be enough. It's just enough to trigger the fight, flight, or freeze. And a fight response has been triggered when the individual suddenly responds aggressively to someone or something that frightens him or her. A flight response has been triggered when the individual suddenly responds aggressively to something that frightens him or her. A flight response has been triggered when she or he responds to a perceived threat with an intense urge to flee. Like, I gotta get out of here, like I gotta leave, I gotta go, I can't be here anymore. And then just panic sets in. Or symbolically, with a sudden launching into like obsessive compulsive, you know, just fearful, you're just in fear. A freeze response has been triggered when she or he suddenly goes numb and you disassociate and you escape, and you I don't know, you have anxiety, and or you just start like daydreaming, or you um, start watching TV and you're just so focused on the TV and you just don't want to hear anything that's going on, and that's just like you're just getting lost because you don't want to deal with the trauma, or what the trauma, the potential trauma that you think is happening to you. Um, and that trauma, again, um, that trauma is a form of like spacing out. You just want to get as far away from the thoughts and the memories of whatever the traumatic event that happened. So that's all the fight, flight, or freeze. Those are all the things that we do, that we've done, that I've done. I'm sure others have done also. But there's actually a fourth type of an F, the F, fight, flight, or freeze. There's a fourth F. And this fourth type response, it can be seen in many codependency, and it's defined as the inability to express rights, needs, and boundaries in relationships. It is a disorder of assertiveness that causes the individual to attract and accept exploitation, abuse, and or neglect. It's the fawn response. With the fight, flight, or freeze, it's a fawn repertoire of instinctive responses to trauma. Fawn, according to Webster's dictionary, means to act servilely, cringe, and flatter. And basically what it's saying is it's the response, it's the core response of many codependents. Flatter. And I believe this response is the core of many codependents because what happens is codependents learn fawn at a very young age. And it's in a process that might look something like a toddler. Like a toddler learns quickly that protesting, saying no, fighting leads to more discipline. It leads to more consequences. That you're scared, you're afraid of what's going to happen, you're afraid of the consequences. So instead of fighting, instead of fleeing, instead of freezing, you just, it's almost you could almost say it's kind of like the gray rock with the narcissist. You kind of just go gray rock, like, you're just like agreeing to disagree, to not agree, to not, you know what I'm saying? It's just like you're just literally going to where you're not saying nothing because you're not going to say no, you're not going to fight because you're afraid of what response or what the consequence is going to be of that. And so, as a child, we learn that. And I know as a child, I learned that. So basically it's the fear of your parent retaliating against you. And so you relinquish the fight response, deleting no from your vocabulary, like no, I can't, or no, I won't, or you just basically, in your learning skills, in your speaking skills, in your response skills, even as an adult, we're afraid to say no. People want stuff from us, they expect stuff from us, but because we're so it's for, I'm not saying I'm a people pleaser, but you become so accustomed to you don't want to upset people. You don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers, and you don't want people to be upset with you. Or if you tell them no, you're obsessing about, I wonder what they're thinking. Like, are they thinking this about me? Are they thinking that about me? Or maybe I should have done it. Like, I mean, I probably could have done it and been okay, but something inside of me was telling me no. So, you're constantly trying to convince yourself that saying no is okay. And saying no is okay. Saying no is okay. If you don't feel that something's right, that's your gut instinct, and that's the, right from wrong, telling you that It's okay to say no. It's okay to say I'm not going to go there. It's okay to say no, I don't want to go with you. It's okay to say no, I don't want you to come to my house. Or it's okay to say no, I can't do this. I can't do what you're asking me to do. And be okay with saying no, and not go sit back and say, God, like, why did I say no? Like, what's going to happen now that I said no? And you have that fear because, and people know when you have this fear, people who know that you're dealing with post-traumatic stress, a lot of times, I'm not saying everybody will, but a lot of people will use that against you, and they'll use that as leverage over you because they know that you're not going to want to say no, or they know that you have some insecurities in some areas. You know, we do struggle. We struggle. We can be very confident. You know, we can be very sure of ourselves, but we can also be on the other end of the spectrum and be not so sure of ourselves and not so secure. And we might come off like we're being super insecure and we have it all together. But inside, we're just that scared little girl or that scared little boy who is afraid to disappoint their parent, basically. And if it's a spouse, if it's a friend, if it's your boss, if it's, you know, no matter who it is, confrontation and consequences are always scary for somebody who's, you know, lived through trauma. And you know the consequences of the past, and you know what's happened or what could happen, but you also have to remember what you've survived. You also have to remember that you survived that trauma, that you lived through that abuse, that you came out on the other side. And yeah, you might have, scars and bruises, and some parts of you might be shattered, but you came out and you're still standing. And so, there's that part of us inside that doesn't want to go back there, that we don't, when there's a trigger, the thought of, oh my God, like, I have to experience that again, who would want to? Nobody would want to. You might survive it, and you might know that, okay, I can get through this because I've gotten through this, that, and the other. But basically, I never heard of the fawn response. I never even knew it existed in the 31 years that I've been in and out of therapy. This is the first time that I've ever heard of the fawn response. And I'm so glad that I learned of it, because it really is the majority of my responses. The majority of my responses that I've had. I mean, of course, I do the fight, flight, or freeze. I've had those responses also, like, the entire time. But when I became aware just recently of this fawn response, abusive parents, when you talk back to your parents, you get, I don't know, let's say you were physically abused and you said, I don't know, I don't want to right now, or I don't feel good, or clean your room. Okay, well, maybe you didn't say, no, I'm not going to clean my room. Maybe you said, okay, Mom, I'll clean my room after I go to the bathroom, or, I'll clean my room, but they want it done right now. So a lot of times you're just going to get popped in your mouth. You could get punched. I mean, I don't know, like, what you went through as a child, what the ramifications were for saying no, or saying, okay, can I do it after? Or, I mean, who knows? Just your parents, like, just, they put that fear in you. Some parents, not all parents. I'm talking about abusive parents, okay? I'm talking about dysfunctional, toxic parents that, you have to remember that it's not you, okay? We didn't ask to be brought into this world. None of us did, and neither did they. And there's a root to their dysfunction, and there's a root to why they abuse. And, they say hurting people hurt people. And I mean, I believe that's true. But at the same time, it doesn't make it okay. And at some point we have to, you have to break that cycle. I feel that I've broken that cycle. And am I still living with the consequences of, even though I've broken the cycle? Um, you would, a person would think that because you broke the cycle and you're a different type of person or a different type of parent, that, you know, it's really brighter on this side, and you know, you're appreciated a little bit more, you're valued a little bit more, you're respected a little bit more because, you know, you were abused, but you didn't abuse your children. But it's almost like backwards. It's I feared my dad. I feared my dad with my life. I was terrified, um, to the point where when I was a child, I was so scared at times that I would literally just pee my pants. Like I would just start peeing where I was standing or where I was sitting because that's how scared that I was. And I chose a different route with my children. Thank God. I wanted to be the opposite of that. So I didn't want my kids to be afraid of me. I didn't want them to hear my car pull up or hear me walk in the door and just, you know, get sick to their stomach and cringe and be not know what was going to happen. I was very predictable and very loving, but not loving, I guess loving too much. I wasn't strict enough. I didn't discipline enough. And there's hard to find balance, you know. You don't want to abuse, um, because you know what it's like to be abused. Um, but I just wanted to share with you guys the fawn response. And if any of you have had this response and you know, you have the fight, flight, or freeze, but then you're like, okay, but I don't do any of those things because I do, you know, I'm afraid to say something. I'm afraid to fight. I'm afraid to run because what are the consequences going to be? So very, very, very early on, you learn, or you don't learn no. No is taken out of your vocabulary. And so it's always, okay, yeah, no, I don't feel like doing it. Do I want to do it? No, but I'm not going to say no because this group of people are going to, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to make fun of me. They're going to not want to be around me. I don't know, this guy's not going to want to go out with me if I say no. You know, this girl's not going to want to go out with me. I mean, you know, it's, it's really sad. It's really sad. And I mean, I'm glad I discovered it, but I mean, I just think that it's so sad that, I mean, sadly, many abusive parents, you know, reserve punishment, reserve reserve their most harsh punishment for talking back. And talking back can be anything, and it doesn't have to be you're cussing or you're talking back to your parents. It could just be mean. It could just be a simple, that's not what I said, or I didn't mean that. To a parent, it could be anything talking back. It doesn't necessarily mean you're talking back saying like, no, I'm not going to do it, or no, I don't have to do it, or I'll do it later. It's just like, okay, you know, I'll do it as soon as I'm done, or um, I didn't do that, or it wasn't me. That's considered talking back in some parents, in some families, and you get abused for it. And so when you take no out of the vocabulary, you grow and you're a teenager, then you're an adult, and then you're still not saying no. Um, and it's just, you know, it just completely extinguishes the child's right, the human right, the human right to have a response. It's taken away from us. It's taken away. It's Nobody has the right to take that away, but sadly, you're a child. You're under the care of your parents, or you know, whoever it is that's abusing you. It could be your spouse. It could be a relative. It could be a friend. Whoever it is that you're being abused by has taken that power away from you, and they don't have the right. I mean, they just simply do not have the right to take that from you. Um, We also learn early on the natural flight response. It exasperates the danger that you feel to try to flee. So you can't even flee um, because you're afraid. You're afraid to run, which is why we have the fawn response, and you're just afraid to say no. I don't know. It just has you like going in circles to where um, we develop OCD. We develop you become a workaholic, you become an alcoholic, you become a drug addict, you can spend money, you can be a sex addict. There's so many different ways that we deal with and process those emotions that are just pushed down, and the ability to say no, to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. No, this is not acceptable. No, I'm better than that. I don't deserve that. I'm worthy. Like, I don't deserve this situation. I don't deserve the abuse. You don't deserve it. Nobody does. And it's okay to say no, and it's okay to walk away, and it's okay to put yourself, go to a safe place. It's okay to tell somebody, share it with somebody. Don't suffer in silence. But we don't want fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. Like, we don't want any of that. But the fact that, you know, not saying no is something that you've done for years and you didn't even know that it was a response. It's an actual response. And I think it comes from fear. Me personally, I think that fight, flight, or freeze, yeah, I've done all those things. But sometimes fight, flight, or freeze, I literally freeze. I won't say no. I'll do things that I don't want to do, and inside my head, the whole time I'm doing it, I'm saying, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Just screaming on the inside, and knowing that nobody can hear me. Um, so, it's just a really, it's a really, it's a really sad thing. It's a really sad thing to discover, but just know, do your research, and just know that you're not crazy. It's nothing that you did to cause the abuse. You didn't do anything to deserve it. Um, Fight, flight, or freeze. Always go to a safe place. If you can run, run. Freeze. Only freeze if you're going to be in a safe place. Don't freeze and let somebody continue to abuse you, if at all possible. If you can get away, call somebody. Call 911 if you have to. Um, but just know that it's normal when you can't figure out why you can't tell people no. It's because somewhere way back when, you, by saying no, you had suffered some pretty severe consequences that traumatized you, which is probably one of the reasons that you have the post-traumatic stress. We won't talk about probably all the other things that caused it, but just be aware, do your research about the fawn response, pick up the book. If you can, pick up any book with post-traumatic stress. You can Google all the fight, flight, or freeze, and all the OCD and addictions, and just coping skills and coping mechanisms. But definitely Google the fawn response and see what you can find on it. See if there's many books. I'm going to pick up another book. This book was actually loaned to me by my therapist, and I have a PDF. I have this in a PDF. So if anybody out there is struggling with post-traumatic stress, I can actually email it to you. You can leave me your email, or you can leave me your Instagram or whatever. I could DM you if you don't want to post your email address, for anybody to get it. But I can email you the PDF of this exact book. And I'm sure maybe the library probably has it. I don't know. You could pick it up on Amazon also. But I would be more than happy to email you the PDF version of this. But do your research, you guys. There's so much more. I'm going to be doing some more videos the more that I'm reading and the more that I'm finding out and still learning. And it's so sad that, like, here I am 31 years later and I'm still learning so much more about mental health and bipolar and post-traumatic stress, BPD, borderline personality disorders, anxiety, depression, mania. There's so much that I've learned over the years. So no, I'm not a doctor, but I always tell everybody, but I'm pretty much a doctor, you know, like any physical ailment, just tell me what your symptoms are. And 8 out of 10 times I pretty much can call it. So anyway, you guys, I just wanted to share that with you. I know it's kind of random, but I was just so excited to learn about it because it really explains a lot. Like, now a lot of things are making sense for me. So hopefully it'll make sense for you. And it could be an answer to maybe something you've been wondering about. So anyway, you guys, leave your questions, comments, suggestions down below, and let me know what you think about, you know, the whole, I look a hot mess. I know, I know, I know. But let me know what you think about the whole fight, flight, or freeze and, you know, the post-traumatic stress and, you know, what are you suffering with, or do you know somebody, or, you know, are you feeling unsafe, or, you know, just always reach out. Obviously, I'm not like a doctor and I'm not an agency, but I can reach out for you. I can talk to you. I can listen. You know, I can talk you through things. I can let you know what coping skills have worked for me. And I know coping skills are like, people are like, okay, coping skills, like, really, like, right now, like, I'm from a 0 to 10, I'm like 100, and it's hard to bring you back down to a calm place. So I know about all the breathing techniques and, you know, envisioning yourself on a cloud, and, you know, it's all helpful stuff. But realistically, when you're in the heat of the moment of that panic attack, um, or that trigger, of a trauma situation, breathing, counting to 10 really is like out the door. So I know that it's very irritating when people tell me that. So anyway, you guys, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to me. And if you found it helpful, give this video a thumbs up, share my channels, and I will see you guys in my next one. So I look forward to sharing more and learning from you guys also. Bye, guys.